Hope everybody's well. Happy New Year to you. Haven't seen you since last year, and wow, you're looking really good. So, hey, it's great to be together. If you're joining us online, good morning and welcome. Please say hello in the chat if you haven't already done so. It's a bit chilly in here today, so if you need to sit closer to somebody, please do so. As long as they've taken a test, right? No, anyway. But cool. All right, moving on. I don't know what your holiday was like, but just before Christmas, I was saying to someone at the back there, just before Christmas, we had that moment in our lives where it was like, can we go up north? Can we not? Can we see people? Can we not? And I don't know if this happened to you, if you've got children still in education. For two of our kids' schools, we found out like the day before that they were actually finishing early. Beth, being a teacher, was annoyed at that because her school decided not to finish early. But anyway, so we collected a bunch of kids a few days earlier because their schools closed earlier than originally scheduled. And I don't know, you're making these plans, but then you're changing plans, and then the plans that you've changed have to be made again and changed again. When things are so uncertain, it's hard to find certainty. And we really felt like, let's hit this new year, let's move forward this new year and actually look at, let's be honest and say we really are in a season of uncertainty. How can we find certainty in a world which is uncertain? And this isn't just our experience, my experience, your experience. This is actually a global experience. It's happening to everybody in the last few years. And it's happening so much, and people talk about it so much, it's actually just getting annoying in some ways now, because we're just kind of like, can we just move on from and have something else? But it's still going on, isn't it, all around the world? So this is a global experience, and one of our children said the other day, when I'm older, they're going to teach about this in school, aren't they? And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. They will teach about this in school. And you've heard that quote, you probably heard that quote, nothing is certain in life except death and taxes. Do you know how many years ago that was said? 1789. Benjamin Franklin in 1789 said, nothing is certain except death and taxes. And you think, wow, nothing much has changed there. Another friend shared this with me. It's from someone else had put it on their Facebook, and it said this. It says, 2019, unexpected. 2020, unprecedented. 2021, unsocial. 2022, uncertain. And it sort of summed up the last few years for most of us. I don't know how many of you have had to cancel plans. How many of you have had to readjust things that you thought you were going to go see family members maybe, or you had my son's had 2 concerts that have been booked and canceled on him. How many of us have had family events or holidays or things that we tried to do, but we had to change? And even now, you might have even thought, because we all think about this, especially when it's cold and it's the winter, we think, where could we go on holiday this year? I know, my front room. It's like, it's hard to know, can we even make plans to try to go away overseas? And do you remember, cast your mind back a few years ago, about this time every year, do you remember all of the adverts that used to come on TV about going away on holiday? As soon as it got cold in Britain, it was like, fly away, book your summer, book somewhere warm. And you had all these like pictures of people in these lovely idyllic settings. I can't remember seeing an ad yet for anybody advertising a lovely, warm summer holiday. Just saying. You see, even the industry knows it's hard for people to make plans. If you run your own business, or if you work with staff, or you manage people, or you're an employee, even your rotas have been hard sometimes to figure out because of staff shortages and changes. And we're dealing with an unprecedented season of uncertainty. And we thought, so how in the midst of all this uncertainty, is there a way? Can we find certainty? And that's what we're going to be looking at. And there was this guy that lived 2,000 years ago, and he has been offering people certainty in life ever since. And really believe that following Jesus is actually the best way for us to find purpose in our lives, for us to find certainty, for us to find security, for us to find stability. And he's been doing it for thousands of years. And whether you believe in Jesus or not yet, whether this is something you're still exploring or something you're considering or just maybe fed up with, I'd like you to either look at it for the first time or maybe look at it again. Because if we've been around church for a while, maybe some of these things we've heard before. So I'd invite you to look at it again. Or maybe this is the first time you're hearing some of this stuff. And so I ask you to look at it for the first time. And Jesus inspired people, and he gave them certainty, and it all started with this really simple but straightforward invitation, and it was, follow me. Follow me. Following Jesus gives your life direction. It gives your life purpose and security. And nowadays, if somebody says, hey, would you follow me? It has a totally different meaning. Presumably, it talks about social media stuff, right? So if you're going to follow somebody, you follow your favorite actor, he or she posts regularly, your favorite musician, your favorite band. Maybe it's an organization you follow. Maybe it's a brand you follow. Maybe you've got a friend or a family member. If you're on social media, whatever stream it is, the uptake is you're supposed to follow people. And when you follow people, you stay informed on what's going on. So the other day, the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer had dropped. My kids tell me that's the word you say. Anyway, it had just come out. And so I'm picking up our gang from school. And it's in the afternoon, it's like 3:30, 3:45, whatever. We're driving home from Hitchin, and I said to my daughter, oh, the new Spider-Man trailer came out. And she's like, yeah, I know, Dad. She says, yeah, like Tom Holland put on his Insta this morning at like 2 past midnight. And I was like, okay. Sorry this is such old news, So, but because she follows Tom Holland, and they like Marvel films, he's one of the actors, he plays Spider-Man, if you don't know, because they follow them, they know about it because as soon as they turn their phones on in the morning, they have updates and notifications. And so do you think Jesus, when he said, follow me, he was like, hashtag the real carpenter? Or, I don't know. I mean, what do you think he meant? Like, the actual Messiah? I don't know. I mean, what was his handle? Did he want people to just follow him so he could have information? And so it's not quite what he meant, really. You know that. It meant something different. And what we're going to look at today is how it was an invitation. It was an invitation. It wasn't for information. It wasn't for updates. It wasn't so you can just know what's going on and be kept abreast of everything that happens. It was an invitation for relationship, not an invitation for information. So I hope that makes sense on the difference about Jesus, difference for what he meant when he said, follow me. It's an opportunity. Invitation is an opportunity, and it was an opportunity for everyone. Everyone. And I just think this is so incredible, and it's so important for us who call ourselves Jesus followers to understand this thing. And don't take my word, Dave. Because we're going to look at a few examples of where Jesus spoke to some people and told them and invited them to follow him. And it meant follow me and discover a new way to live and a new way to love. Following Jesus is a new way of living and a new way of loving. It affects how we live and it affects how we treat others. And you might be surprised at who Jesus invited to join his team and follow him. The first people he invited were people that were written off. People that were like, just in that culture at that time, they were write-offs. If you read the first-hand accounts, you read the biographies of the life of Jesus, it's like, wow. There's eyewitness accounts of how he interacted with young people, how he interacted with old people, how he interacted with male people. Male people? How he interacted with male and female. How he even interacted with the enemy, like Roman centurions. how he interacted with religious people, how he interacted with all different types of people, people that were wealthy, people that weren't wealthy. If you just read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, biographies about the life of Jesus, it explains to you and it shows you who he hung out with and the type of people he hung out with. And the first one we're going to look at today is this guy that should have been totally written off. In Matthew 9, verse 9, it says this: Jesus went on from there, and he saw Matthew, the tax collector, and he said, "Follow me." A few weeks ago, we spoke about what it meant to be a tax collector at that time, so I don't want to spend too much on that. But Matthew was a tax collector, and back then, just like today, people didn't like paying taxes. You know what I mean? Raise your hand if you like paying taxes. I understand that it helps things, but we don't really like paying taxes. And we get annoyed when other people don't pay their share of taxes. See, not only do you not like paying taxes, but you get really annoyed at the super wealthy who somehow get away with not paying any, right? And we get upset at companies that don't seem to pay their share. It's like, well, we all have to do it. How come you're not doing it? There's this thing that rises in us when it comes about taxes. But for a Jewish person, it actually went deeper than that. It was more than just not liking to pay your taxes. And here's why. So they were occupied by the Romans. So the Roman people were controlling the Jewish people at this time. Now, if you were a Roman Caesar, they viewed everyone who was the Roman ruler as a god. So Caesar was viewed as a god. So these Jewish people, who one of their earliest, most basic commands is, "You shall have no other gods before me." They're forced to pay taxes to an institution to support what essentially is to them a false god. It goes bigger than just not liking to pay taxes. You know, it's like a violation of what you believe you should be doing. And it also goes deeper. Because by being forced to do something like that, it reminds you that your life is not your own and that you are essentially a slave to somebody else. And for thousands of years in their culture, they went from being slaves in Egypt, being an occupied people controlled by other people, and yet here we are again, 2,000 years later, still being controlled by people, a force outside of our control. So to pay the taxes, when it's not only just, you're actually giving money to a foreign god, and every time you do so, it's like reminding you that your life is not your own, and that you're controlled by something else. You're essentially a slave. Now that's ugh. And just imagine you're growing up in your village, and one of your friends, as you get older, you used to hang out together, you'd go fishing together, you'd go to the market together. But when they got older, your friend became a tax collector. Because what happened was, in that time, they would put it out for tender, and you could sort of barter and buy your right to be the tax collector for that local area. So this dude, Matthew, is a Jewish person from that area who's essentially now got the license to tax that area. And he's one of your mates. He's one of the people that you know. I mean, your parents know his parents. And here he is, collecting taxes from you. Not only forcing you to give money to a foreign god, not only reminding you that you're a slave to somebody else, he's actually working for the enemy. That's why tax collectors were the scummiest of the scummiest. Okay, they were the lowest of the low. They had their own category. It was like, if you read in the Gospels, it talks about like tax collectors and sinners. It's like their own category. They were like, the worst of the worst. And here comes the best of the best, this guy named Jesus, who's been talking about the right way to live, the right way to do things. And here he comes to this Jewish boy who is taking advantage of his own people, and in the process, making his own pockets fat. And like rich people, sometimes today we don't like how rich people get away with certain things. It's the same then. Here's Matthew, the rich person, getting away with certain things that we can't get away with. And Jesus is going to have a conversation with him. Come on, it's about time. Because we've been waiting for somebody to tell him off. We've been waiting for somebody to give him a right good clop over the head or whatever. And Jesus walks up to him, and instead of telling him off, he says, "Follow me." Instead of telling him off, he says, "Follow me. Come with me. Join me. Follow me. Follow me." And Matthew doesn't even give us any indication that he was expecting it, looking for it, wanting it. We don't even know. He just says, "Follow me." See, your starting place for faith, your starting point for faith is nothing. You could be the worst of the worst. That's your starting point. You could be a doubter, an atheist, an agnostic. Perfect. That's where we start. That's where we start. And Jesus says to this guy, who everybody else has written off, "Follow me." Next little example, Jesus invites the ordinary, totally ordinary. He invited those who were ordinary. In Matthew 4, we've got this story recorded for us, Matthew 4, 18 to 20, and it says this. It says, so Jesus is there, and he's just by the Sea of Galilee, and he sees two brothers, Simon and Andrew, and they're fishing, because they're fishermen. There you go. And he says to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Now we know that they were ordinary blokes going about an ordinary business. I mean, they were productive. They're working hard with their hands. They're doing their job. They're working for their families. They're providing for one another. We know from other passages, other verses, that their dad was also there working with them. So it sounds like it was the family business. And hey, they're being productive. They're not like Matthew, who's taking advantage of the people. He's just ordinary blokes doing an ordinary, everyday kind of job. Salt of the earth, get your hands dirty, just get involved, kind of rough and ready people. We know that they weren't the wealthiest. If they were, they wouldn't be there. So we know that. We know that also they weren't the most clever in terms of religion or rituals or faith. We know that. Because culturally, in the Jewish culture, the Jewish people, all the boys went to school from the age of 6, and they began to study. They studied the Talmud and the Torah. They read their scriptures, and they read how you apply them, and they had to study them, and they had to memorize the first 5 books of what we call our Bible. They had to memorize those books. They had to, by mind, to memorize them, and they had to recite them. And they had to study, and they went into these schools that they had to study. And they got tested at age 10. And if you didn't know all 5 books by heart by the age of 10, well, you didn't pass the test and you moved on. Now, I can't imagine my 10-year-old child memorizing 5 books. I mean, even if they're David Walliams books, things that are interesting and funny and goofy and silly. But could you imagine your 10-year-old child memorizing the entire book of Genesis? I mean, that's kind of woo, guess what? We're going to Leviticus. It's like, come on, this is like this. Could you imagine a child memorizing what we know as our first 5 books of the Bible? That's pretty crazy. And then to be tested on it and to hear you recite it, man, they must have been sitting there for hours. It's worse than a cricket test match, isn't it? It's like sitting there for days and days hoping something actually happens. But anyway, no. You're sitting there. How were they tested? But if they didn't pass the test, they were out of the school. Now, if you passed the test, you were still in the school, you still continued to study the religious laws and the rituals and the applications, and then you got tested again around the age of 14 or 15. And if you passed at the age of 14 or 15, you were still in, because at that point, we're getting to the best of the best of the best. But at this point, if you still weren't as clever as the others or as competent in these areas of the others. If you didn't pass the tests, you failed and you're out. And you would then go and do things like the family business, which could be fishing. So we know these guys. We're not the select pupils because they're fishing. We know that they're not part of the religious elite, which was very important in that culture at that time. They weren't going to then become a scribe or eventually become a Pharisee or maybe one day become their own rabbi, which like a teacher that people followed them. You see, at the age of 14 or 15, you hope that you could find another rabbi that you could follow, that you could connect with. So we know that these two guys are ordinary blokes doing an ordinary job, have no idea how old they are or how long they've been doing it. But you know that they did nothing special other than just go about their everyday business. Just get on with life. Just like the kind of people that most of us really are, just get on with life. And that Jesus goes to these guys who are just getting on with life, who've already been kicked out of the traditional Jewish educational system, and he says to them, follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. I'm going to totally change the way you do things, totally change the way you live and love. He says, follow me and become fishers of men. The next people that Jesus invites is people that had lost their way. Maybe they walked away, or maybe they had gotten fed up. You see, these same disciples, years later, Jesus had died. So these guys had been so enthusiastic at the beginning. They followed along. They joined this whole group of people. They were following Jesus and learning from him and finding out how to do things. And then Jesus dies, which was totally not what they expected. And they didn't expect Jesus to come back from the dead either. That was totally unexpected. Just read how they wrote about it. They didn't believe Jesus had even come back from the dead. They didn't believe it when they saw him. It was a shock to them. And they were fed up, they were disappointed, they were disillusioned, they were worn out, they were tired, they were, what do we do now? And a few of the guys, one of them being this guy Simon, he'd also betrayed Jesus. He'd also turned his back on Jesus. He'd said 3 times, I don't even know you. He'd not only sort of been fed up and disappointed, he's at this point where he's probably feeling really guilty, really ashamed, really embarrassed. You ever made a mistake in front of your friends? It's one thing to be at home on your own, and I did this the other day, had a cafetiere, and I dropped it. And do you know what happens when you drop a glass cafetiere? It breaks. Now, if I did that in front of all of you, it'd probably be funny, you'd all be laughing at me, but anyway, when you're at home, nobody sees your embarrassing mistakes. But when you do it in front of others, it's a bit more embarrassing. It's shameful. And you feel, wow, I've let everybody down. How could I have done this again? That's what Peter's not just thinking, oh, I made this little mistake nobody knows about. Hey, we all know about it. It's been written about, and we've been reading it for thousands of years, dude. Man, you've been dead for ages, and we still know about all your mess ups. Yeah? So Peter's in that place. I've failed, and I've done it in front of my friends. All of them walked away. All of them just didn't know what to do next. And a group of them had decided to go fishing. Because what do? I don't know. Let's go back to what we did before. Anybody want to go fishing? And the whole group of them go fishing. And anyway, long story cut short, when they're fishing, Jesus sees them, calls them to the shore, then they realize it's Jesus, and Jesus has this exchange with Peter, which he says, Peter, do you love me? Yeah, man, I love you. And he asks him 3 times. Same amount of times that Jesus was betrayed by Peter. Jesus asks him 3 times. 3 times. Do you love me? Yes, I love you. Yes, I love you. But one thing we sometimes don't really catch in the end of the story, one of the things, which was one of the last moments these guys had, one of their last experiences with Jesus, they write down what he says to them. And he said to them twice, he says this, John 21, verse 19 and 22. He says it twice in that passage. He says, follow me. See, Jesus invites those who are written off. Jesus invites those who are just ordinary. And Jesus also invites those who are fed up, have had enough, and have actually walked away from the whole kit and caboodle. He invites them again. He gives them the same challenge, the same invitation that he gave to them when they first encountered Jesus. The first time they're speaking to him, he says, follow me. And one of the last times they're speaking to him, he says, follow me. In the midst of everything else that's going on, follow me. In the midst of confusion, disruption, uncertainty, don't know which way is up, which way is down, what are we doing next, where are we going? He just says, follow me. It's so simple, but the invitation is there again. Follow me. Follow me. Jesus restores them. He reminds them. He welcomes them, and he invites them back. I just think it's amazing. When we just take a moment to think about the type of things that Jesus did when he lived here on earth, it's just incredible. And the types of people that he welcomes and invites is just incredible. Now, every week of this series, we're going to look at a really practical thing that we can all do. And so for today, the thing that we want to leave you with is this. Every single day, every day is an invitation to follow. Every day. And you might be like somebody that you feel is written off. You might not even be a follower of Jesus yet. You might be somebody who's not even interested. You haven't even thought about it. Or maybe you have thought about it and you actually hate the idea. Yet Jesus says, follow me. Or maybe you're just like an everyday, ordinary person. You're going about your business. You work in your jobs. You wake up tomorrow. You go to work. You come home. You have something to eat. You watch some TV. You go to bed. I mean, you have an ordinary, everyday life, and yet Jesus is saying to you, follow me. Or maybe you're like those guys who had reached disappointment in your life. You'd reach disillusionment for whatever reason. Maybe something you did that was embarrassing, or maybe something else happened that it didn't work out the way you thought it would. You thought it was going to happen this way, and it didn't happen this way, and you know what? I've just had enough. And one thing that's been really interesting, across the world, there's been a number of people who've walked away from even community and churches. Some estimates put it at 20 to 30% of people have sort of just drifted. They don't see the importance of it anymore. They've gone out of the habit or the benefit, whatever it is. You know, people have different reasons. You know, maybe for you, you've sort of been one of those people that's kind of just like, meh, just drifted a bit. And even in that place, Jesus says, follow me. Whatever you're going through, whatever situation you're at in your life, the invitation is always the same for all of us. Follow me. Follow me. Today can be your next step to follow Jesus. Today can be the next step. Find certainty in knowing my next step is going to be follow Jesus. Make that your next clear step. And everyone is invited. The cynic, the unbeliever, the doubter, the angry, the disillusioned, the weak, the strong, the young, the old, those who feel like failures and those who feel like successes. You could be a CEO or you could be a cleaner. You could be a mechanic or you could be chauffeur driven everywhere you go. You see, all of these stories remind us that nothing you did qualifies you or disqualifies you. You see? Matthew was invited, even though he was the worst of the worst. What he did didn't qualify him or disqualify him. You had two fishermen sitting there going about their everyday business. They didn't have to pass any tests. They weren't given exams. They didn't have to prove themselves. They were invited. The other people had made mistakes, walked away, got disillusioned and upset, and that didn't qualify them or disqualify them. So I wonder what you think you can do that will disqualify you from being a follower of Jesus. Nothing. There's nothing that can disqualify you. There's no entry level that's so high that you failed. There's no bouncer at the door checking everything before you come in. You are invited. I am invited. We are invited. The thing that it requires is surrender. Because it comes down to your choice. It becomes your willingness to just surrender your life, your heart, and say, yes, I will follow. It's up to you. I think that's amazing. I think it's just really incredibly radical to think that Jesus, who gave himself for the earth, to the world, and he invites everyone to follow him, and then he just says to you, but it's your choice. Over to you, kid. Because you have been invited, and it's based on his invitation, not on your abilities. That's cool. Because we all stand on grace. The criteria to be a Jesus follower is not based on you, but based on the one who invited you. Simple phrase, follow me. You have to know your own need and just accept the invitation. Follow me. That one simple phrase. It's deep theology, but it's simple. Follow me. That one phrase, those two words, follow me, will remind you that you're chosen. It reminds you that you are accepted. It reminds you that you are invited. It reminds you that you are wanted. Follow me. Two simple words that say so much. You're invited, you're welcomed, you're wanted. Follow me. And there's two simple words that give you a choice. Follow me. Will you follow me? So we're going to close with a worship song in just a moment. And maybe for you, this is the first time you've heard this kind of conversation, this sort of stuff talked about with Jesus. And if you're a first-time follower, the first time you've heard this stuff, we would love to pray with you. We'd love to walk with you. We'd love to journey with you in faith. If you want to explore it more, we're going to be running an Alpha course. We run an Alpha course a couple times a year. And if you've not heard of Alpha yet, it's just a great way to just ask questions, look at subjects, talk about faith, explore stuff. There's some invite cards on the little tables in front of you, and there's also this card at the back. You can scan the QR code with your smartphone, and you'll get all the details about that. And maybe for you, like one really good, clear next step would be to just begin exploring some stuff and finding out some more things. So get in on that. Maybe for you, a next step could be you want to get involved in one of the Fuse groups. Sam spoke about the different groups we got coming up. So those are starting this week. The leaflets are at the back. You can find out more about the different groups. Maybe just jump in on one for the next few weeks and see how it goes. Maybe that for you is going to be your next step. I don't know what your next step might be. And maybe if you're in that place where your heart, you feel like you've drifted a bit. Maybe for you it's just a case of just turning around and just choosing to come back, follow again. We're going to sing a song now and talks about Jesus being our living hope. And if you'd like anyone to pray with you, you can come. I'll just be over here on the side if you want us to pray with you. But we're just going to go into that song now. And it talks about what Jesus has done for us in the midst of everything going on. He is our living hope. So I'm going to pray for you, and then if we could start the song after that, guys, that'd be great. Jesus, thank you so much for who you are. God, thank you that you are so kind and gracious and compassionate. Thank you that you invite us all to discover more about what it means to follow you. God, I just pray for everybody here, whether they're in the room or watching online, God, that whatever they've got going on in their lives, you would help bring certainty in the midst of uncertainty. God, I ask that you would help just guide people with your next step, the strength of just following you. God, thank you so much. You love us so much. In your name we pray. Amen.
How great the chasm that lay between us. How high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom
Thank you, God, that you have overcome everything. And even though we see in our lives many challenges, we know that as we choose to follow you, we follow someone who can overcome. And more than that, someone who will walk with us through every moment in every day. Amen. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. It's been great to be together as we look ahead into a brand new year and this new series, which we're really excited about. I pray that as you start the day and the week tomorrow, that just that phrase of follow me would be on your mind as you begin that new week. We're really looking forward to journeying together through January on this theme, and hope that you'll join us again next Sunday here on site 10:15 or online at 10:20. But I hope you have a great week and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks.